What if I told you that some of the biggest WWE names you've ever watched, legends, icons, even future world champions, quietly stepped into TNA at one point in their careers, and most fans never even realized it happened? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to see familiar names in a completely different light, and a few of these appearances are so bizarre, you'll probably wonder how they were ever real in the first place. There are certain WWE superstars whose names instantly bring back images of WrestleMania moments, roaring crowds on Raw, or unforgettable rivalries on SmackDown. They feel tied to WWE history so tightly that it's hard to imagine them anywhere else. But wrestling has always been unpredictable. Careers twist, contracts end, and sometimes even the biggest names pop up in places you'd never expect. TNA, especially in its early years, became a revolving door for talent, some stopping by briefly, some testing the waters, and others leaving behind moments that feel almost surreal today. So, let's dive straight into it. Jim Duggan is one of those names that feels permanently attached to a certain era of wrestling. The hacksaw persona, the American flag, the booming "hoo", it's all burned into memory. After his WCW run ended in 2000, Duggan didn't vanish. Like many veterans of that time, he moved through the independent circuit, making appearances and staying active wherever he could. Eventually, that path led him into TNA during its early chaotic phase. When he debuted in March 2003, the crowd reaction told you everything. Fans still loved him. The nostalgia hit instantly. For a few minutes, it works purely on that emotional connection. But as the match went on, reality started to settle in. The pace slowed, the movement became heavier, and it became clear that this wasn't the same Duggan from years before. Even so, TNA leaned into the moment and gave him the win. Soon after, things got even stranger when he teamed with Moondog's Spot in a match that perfectly captured just how unpredictable early TNA could be. Duggan still delivered what people expected: crowd energy, patriotic promos, and that familiar, larger-than-life personality. Months later, he returned, only to fall to Jeff Jarrett, which at that time felt almost like a tradition in TNA. Then there's Cassius Ohno, known to many fans as Chris Hero. While his WWE run didn't quite explode the way some expected, his reputation in the wrestling world runs much deeper than that. Hero built his name across countless promotions, earning respect everywhere he went. TNA was just one stop along that journey. Back in 2003, he appeared under the Chris Hero name, wrestling a handful of matches over several months. But here's the catch: most of those matches weren't even on the main stage. They aired on secondary programming, far from the spotlight where new stars were made. To make matters worse, he didn't win a single match during that run. Loss after loss stacked up, and just like that, his time there faded into the background. Still, for someone like Hero, every experience added to a career built on persistence and adaptability. The Road Warriors are another name that feels larger than life. At their peak, they were unstoppable, redefining tag team wrestling with sheer power and presence. By 2003, though, things had changed. Many fans remember their WWE return around that time, but fewer remember that TNA actually brought them in first. When they showed up, the reaction was massive. That legacy still carried weight. TNA even placed them in a bizarre multi-man main event alongside names like Dusty Rhodes and Jeff Jarrett. It felt like a throwback to another era entirely. The match itself was chaotic, held together largely by those who could still maintain the pace. And then came the kind of twist only early TNA could deliver: masked interference, a reveal tied to past legends, and a finish that felt like it came straight out of the 1980s. Gene Snitsky's appearance years later shows another side of TNA's approach. By 2014, his WWE run was long behind him. Bringing him in at that point felt like reaching far into the past. He arrived as part of a storyline filled with ECW nostalgia, aligning with familiar names and stepping into a chaotic, hardcore environment. But just as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. A few weeks, one match, and that was it. Behind the scenes, it came down to something simple. He didn't feel the deal was worth continuing. Eddie Fatu, later known as Umaga, had a completely different kind of presence. Even early in his career, there was something about him that stood out. After leaving WWE as Jamal, he found his way into TNA and made an immediate impression. His debut was explosive, delivering a high-impact moment that got people talking right away. He formed a tag team, competed across the roster, and became part of that unpredictable early TNA mix. But his time there didn't last long. Opportunities elsewhere came calling, and before long, he was gone, on his way to becoming a far bigger name on a different stage. Chyna's appearance in TNA carries a completely different emotional tone. At her peak, she wasn't just a star, she was groundbreaking, a woman who broke barriers and stood toe-to-toe with anyone. By the time she appeared in TNA years later, things had changed. Her career had slowed, and her life had taken difficult turns. When she returned for one last match, it wasn't about long-term plans. It felt like a moment of recognition, a chance to see her in that spotlight again. Paired with Kurt Angle, she stepped into a match designed to showcase her presence. The crowd reacted strongly, especially during her key moments in the ring. And when it ended, it wasn't just another result, it became the final match of her career, closing a chapter that meant so much to wrestling history. Mike Awesome's brief run is another example of how TNA sometimes struggled to fully use the talent it had. Known for his intensity and unique style, he entered the company with a reputation already built elsewhere. But instead of being placed in a position to showcase that, he was thrown into chaotic matches and storylines that didn't quite fit. Still, there were flashes, moments where you could see exactly why he had been so respected before. Even in the middle of all that unpredictability, those glimpses stood out. The Basham brothers' time in TNA followed a very familiar pattern. Released from WWE, they quickly found themselves in TNA, inserted into a storyline that never quite clicked. It dragged on, filled with repetitive confrontations, and ultimately faded without leaving much behind. For them, it marked one of the final chapters of their careers. Bart Gunn's appearance, though brief, offered something different. After a turbulent WWE run, he reinvented himself in Japan. When he showed up in TNA, he brought that harder edge with him. His match wasn't flashy, but it was intense, a physical contest that stood out from the usual chaos. Even in a single appearance, he managed to leave a stronger impression than many who stayed longer. Vader's presence brought a sense of old-school dominance, even if it was only a glimpse of what he once was. By the time he arrived, his peak was long gone, but the aura remained. A surprise save, a quick match, and just enough impact to remind fans of who he had been. And then there's CM Punk. Before the fame, before the pipe bombs, before becoming one of the most talked-about names in wrestling, he had a very small role in TNA. Standing alongside Raven, barely noticed, it's almost surreal to look back on. His time there ended quickly, and in a way that perfectly reflects how unpredictable those early days were. Dusty Rhodes, on the other hand, didn't just pass through, he became part of the fabric of TNA for a while. Wrestling matches, taking on a leadership role, even turning authority into something uniquely Dusty. His run was chaotic, strange, and somehow perfectly in tune with the company's identity at the time. Diamond Dallas Page's stint followed a similar path, arriving with name value, revisiting old rivalries, and eventually finding himself pulled into the main event scene. It didn't last long, but it added another unexpected chapter to his career. Test's appearance is harder to look back on. It was brief, and there were clear concerns about his condition at the time. TNA moved on quickly, and not long after, his life took a tragic turn. It's one of those moments that reminds you how real the struggles behind the scenes can be. Lex Luger's one-night appearance feels almost unreal. A major name from wrestling's biggest era, showing up for a single match that didn't quite live up to the legacy attached to it. It was more about recognition than performance. Roddy Piper's time in TNA didn't revolve around matches as much as it did moments. Unpredictable, intense, and at times uncomfortable. That unpredictability was always part of who he was, but in this case it created a situation that left a lasting impression for very different reasons. Jake Roberts' appearances came during a difficult period in his life. Instead of a triumphant return, it felt unstable, with moments that had to be edited down just to make sense on television. It wasn't the version of Jake fans wanted to remember.
Randy Savage's involvement should have been huge. On paper, it looked incredible, but what happened in reality didn't match the expectation. A delayed entrance, limited involvement, and a performance that felt far removed from his legendary past. Seth Rollins' connection to TNA is one of the most fascinating what-ifs. A brief early appearance, followed by a serious contract offer years later. He came close, very close, to signing, but one final call changed everything, sending him down the path that would define his career. And finally, Dean Ambrose, known today as Jon Moxley. His TNA appearance was so short, so quiet, that it barely registers in history. A tryout match, no follow-up, and then he was gone. Looking back, it's incredible to think that someone with his presence passed through without leaving a mark. And that's what makes all of this so interesting. Wrestling careers aren't straight lines. They're filled with detours, missed opportunities, and unexpected stops along the way. TNA, especially in those early years, became a place where those moments happened, sometimes forgotten, sometimes unbelievable, but always part of the bigger story. If any of these names surprised you, just imagine how many more hidden moments like this exist in wrestling history, waiting to be uncovered.